Okay, we are back. Episode 12 of this 1988 Dodge Raider rebuild project I've been working on. This week was a quick week. Got a few things done. I spent some time working on the firewall insulation and the transmission tunnel insulation. You can see here where I tore out the old stuff. I cleaned up the rubber backing and glued on some new carpet insulation that you can buy at the local carpet store. A little cheaper than buying the carpet insulation off of a automotive website. So that went well. You just use the old insulation as a pattern for the new. You mark it up and cut out the holes you need for the shifter and for the seat belts and for anything else that protrudes through it. Okay, there you have it. This is our new piece of insulation for the tunnel inside of the cabin. Cut out all the patches for the shifter and the seat belts and whatever else has to protrude. So we will set that aside and put that in the car just a minute. And then next we will cut out all the holes for the firewall insulation, and then we'll be done, ready to install it. Okay, as you can see here, we have the firewall rubber finished. Have glued on some new insulation padding, and it smells very good now. It smells like a new car. Smells better than a baby's butt. So as you can see here, we're tucking these corners up into the firewall and pulling the wiring into the cutouts, as well as lining up the holes for the AC tubes and various bolts. So you're just massaging this insulation into the proper position. Just takes a little bit of patience, but it'll slowly come together. Okay, you can see here that the firewall insulation is installed. It looks pretty nice. Tucks back in there at all the attachment points. There's a couple of screw holes and then a couple of tabs that keep it in. But then next we're going to start putting the air boxes in, which get bolted right to that firewall in 3 sections, and that will become mostly hidden by everything that's behind there. So we're just wrapping up putting some insulation on this tunnel here, transmission tunnel, and the previous owner has installed a CB radio. Here's the handle for it, here's the base, and then it goes up to an antenna in the corner there, and I think I'm going to leave it in. It's already installed and wired in, and it might be fun to have a CB. I mean, I know they're not cool anymore, but you know, if the zombie apocalypse happens and your cell phone quits working, I've got a CB that I can call truckers on or something. But it's wired in. I'm going to leave it for now and see how it works, and then I can always pull it out if I don't like it later. Also spent some time scrubbing parts. I spent a couple of days scrubbing suspension parts, or I should say transmission parts, transmission mount, skid plates, all of the levers and linkage for the shifter. It was all caked with grease and grime and sand and road debris. So I just stood out front of the house here and with a wire brush and a can of gasoline. I didn't really videotape any of that, I don't believe, because it's just tedious and repetitive and it's boring. I've showed you some clips of me cleaning parts in the past, and nothing exciting about it. But I did end up with a bunch of clean parts. I've pretty much cleaned everything that I need to finish this car up. There's not too much left that I have to scrub. A few odds and ends that I need to paint black, but we'll attack that when the weather turns a little bit nicer here next week. Also, after I put the insulation in the firewall area, I put the air boxes back in the car, the fan box, the heater core box, and the air conditioning box. All three went in without a hitch. Spent a little bit of time wrapping up the plumbing for the heater core. Had to solder together a couple of copper corners. A couple of corners were a little bit too severe for the heater hose to negotiate. They kind of kinked up. So to fix that, you just create a couple of corners out of copper, half-inch copper pipe. All right, we're going to start actually putting parts back onto this car now. We're going to start with the fan box, get it bolted back in and wired up, and then we'll move on to the AC box and the heater box. So we have the fan box installed with the computer for the car that sits up under here, and it's really not much of a computer. It just controls a little bit of the vacuum functions on the original carburetor, and a few relays over here. You have a four-wheel drive relay up here and a flasher relay back there. Make sure everything's plugged in before you move on to the next box. And next will be the air conditioning box. Just have to install it with the AC hoses running out this hole and the drain running out that hole. And in between the two boxes is a metal strap. It's got a foam insert that we will strap these boxes together with. It's a clamp on one end, and this clamp allows you to take the clamp off and remove an individual box if you needed to. You can leave the fan box and work on the AC or work on the heater core. And these are removable straps that connect everything. there is one screw or bolt that holds this together from the firewall on the engine side. And you can see that bolt that sticks through right here. So next we will take this strap and attach it to the seam here where these two come together. So here's this attachment strap I was telling you about. These two boxes have a little bit of a gap between them, and this is a foam lined strap that attaches the two together. See if I can do this one-handed. It just clips together and creates a seal between the two. And there you have it. Now we have both boxes in. Last thing I have to do is just hook up the wiring for the air conditioners, relays right here and here, and sensors. And then we will move on to the heater core box, which goes right there in the center. So there you go, we have all three air boxes in. I just put the heater core box in. I've got to finish up with a little bit of plumbing right there. We're gonna run a second hose running out of here into the firewall. But we are one small step closer to having this thing wrapped up. Also, I spent a couple of days working on the dash. I completely took the dash apart and used soapy water to clean all the parts, mainly the air conditioning hoses and vents, and took apart the glove box and the radio and the console. Everything came apart, and we scrubbed all the grime and grease and taco sauce Slurpee sauce out of it. Got it all cleaned up. Looks pretty nice now. So this is going to be a pretty nice interior as far as smelling nice, and you won't be afraid to bump against the dash now and wreck your white sweater. Let's see how dirty this dash is. Well, this air door here seems to be stuck, so I'm going to have to clean it up and figure out why it won't open. You can see how dirty this inside of this vent is. Pretty black. So as you can see here, we have a bunch of interior parts dealing with the heating and air conditioning system that have been cleaned. The glove box. Just cleaning everything with soapy water and taking all the grime and dust off. There you go. Clean and ready to be put back in the car. So most of these light bulbs here are burned out. I only found one that actually works, so I have to go buy a package of these tiny light bulbs and replace all of the dash lights. You can see on a few of these tabs, I've added a large washer because the plastic ends of some of these, this ducting is so brittle that it's broken off. And so because I lost the hole, or most of the hole for the attachment point, I just add a really big fender washer to reach out and grab some fresh material. And I even did it on this one up here. I even added a couple of popsicle sticks on the top side and the bottom side to add some pressure to keep that attached. Won't ever be able to see it, and I don't feel like spending the money to buy a new piece of piping that you'll never see anyway. There's 3 or 4 parts like that that broke on this that I'm kind of fixing as I go along. All right, on a side note, I've gotten a few messages asking what I'm using to film when I'm out here working and how to upload it to YouTube, what the process is for filming a scene and editing it, putting it on YouTube. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, with today's technology, I'll show you what I'm using. I borrowed this camera from my dad so that I could film the camera that I'm using here. So I'm really just running a basic Nikon D800 setup. It's attached to a AJA Mini Key Pro 4K recorder. Then I've got a Marshall studio monitor so that I can calibrate the colors. And then it's attached to a Bogen Manfrotto tripod, which is a 100mm bowl. You got the follow focus, and the matte box is used to attach filters. If it's a little bit too bright or too dark, we can attach a filter to it. But this is kind of the setup I came up with off of eBay, and it works pretty good. It's a little bit bulky as far as getting it under the car to show you the transmission and whatnot, but I've learned to put my back into it. So as you can see there, it's not a big deal, just kind of straightforward. You put together a little package and enough to be able to get a good image, upload that to YouTube, and you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of time. I'd say I spend probably maybe four 8-hour shifts every week to get the film edited and uploaded to YouTube. But yeah, you know, if you guys are working on projects and want to film some of it, put on YouTube, you know, getting into a used camera, you know, $6,000 or $8,000, probably pretty reasonable. You know, you could expect to spend about $6,000 or $8,000 on a camera package, and you know, if you can't quite afford, you know, an $8,000 camera, well, just go to the Snap-on truck and maybe put it on your Snap-on account. They're usually pretty good about extending credit to anybody, so that's always an option. Okay, what we've got here is failure to communicate. I ordered a couple of sensors we were talking about last week. If I can open them up, I'll show them to you. Yep. So the 4-wheel drive switches on the transmission, there's 2 of them that show the dashboard whether you're in 4 high or 4 low. And like I mentioned in the last video, the ones that came off the car were broken. One was broken, one worked, however they were missing some wires. And so I bought some new ones. Now I found some NOS original Japanese switches online for about 80 bucks a piece. They were kind of hard to find. I did find them, but that's way expensive. So I come up with this South Korean version that they were using in like Isuzu Troopers or something like that. And it's the same exact switch. And they also come in pairs that are a little different than each other. So you can't order just 2 of the exact same switch. You have to order one of each. And what I mean by that is these switches will plug into each other, and then they plug into the dash like that, and then they go to the dash. That's what the second wire is for. And so as you click that into 4 high or 4 low, it pushes down on one or both of these switches and tells you which gear you're using. So those showed up today. Oh, I was gonna mention, I'm sorry. Yeah, 85 bucks for the originals from Japan, $8.50 from South Korea on these. So I saved 90%, I couldn't believe it. So those showed up today. We'll put them on transmission and move on. Okay, we're putting these 2 new 4-wheel drive switches in the side of this transfer case. And I mentioned just a minute ago that I bought these out of South Korea. They're Hyundai switches for $8.50 a piece instead of the NOS Japanese switches for about 80 bucks a piece. Exact same part number and same layout with the wires. You need one wire that has 2 male leads and one has a male and a female. We'll plug them into the transfer case. These will plug into each other, and then they plug into the wiring harness right here. Went ahead and added a copper washer to seal each one of these. It calls for it in the book. Oh, before I put that in, before I forget, you're going to want to add the ball bearings that came out of this transfer case. These ball bearings run against the rod as you shift, and they push this plunger in and out. So if you do not add the ball bearing, then it won't work. I'm going to add a bit of assembly lube that will keep that ball bearing on there as I put it up. Alright, so now let's test this again and see what kind of readings we get with these new switches. Worked a bit on the transmission. I'm still waiting for one seal to show up. It's a front output shaft seal that I probably could just go down to the auto parts store and buy. However, I already ordered it, so I might as well just wait. They're not that expensive, $8 or something like that. So I'm waiting for that to show up. So that's the hold up on putting the transmission back in the car. So that about wraps it up for episode 12 of this rebuild project. Nothing too exciting this week, but we got some stuff done. And very shortly we will be moving on to the much more exciting stuff of installing the transmission and motor, getting that bad boy fired up. And yeah, looking forward to that. So check back next week and we'll keep you updated. Thanks, bye.